Kia ora, Aotearoa, salam, namaste, sat sri akal. I'm your host, Ajay Vasisht, with the Weekender on Sunday, or as most Kiwis like to say, AJ, mate. Welcome to the show. In our head-to-head series, today we are going to be fortunate enough to talk to the man who comes with a high-flying business head and a career that could be just taken to the top of the political ladder as well, who could well be one day in the party leadership position at the National Party. We will be talking to Chris Luxon and ask him to give us his take on this and other important matters in just a little while. Center stage in New Zealand and elsewhere this last week have been the Greens getting rather tactical, asking that they get the party vote if they want to get Ardern at the helm. James Shaw's been urging about this. We'll see what this canny move could do. Normally, we don't bother with the weather on a relaxed Sunday show, but in a slight departure, we were thinking of looking at the spring making way for wintry blast. And then, while we were thinking of doing that, it's changed its mind and the sun is out. So, I don't know what we'll be looking at there. UK के एक कोर्ट में अनिल अंबानी की दलील, गहने बेचकर चुका रहा वकीलों की फीस, जी रहा हूं एक साधारण जीवन, ये कहते हैं अनिल अंबानी, उस पे भी एक नजर डालेंगे. और 5G से कितना तेज होगा इंटरनेट, कितना फायदा कितना नुकसान, भारत समेत दुनिया भर में क्यों हो रहा है विरोध. We also look at the winners and losers in the IPL's opening days और एंड में WhatsApp कॉर्नर में कुछ मुस्कुराहट और कुछ सीरियस भी, एक क्वालिटी कंट्रोल पर छोटा सा चुटकुला और लॉकडाउन पर एक नज्म. On to more interesting and serious fare. As we said in our head-to-head series, today our guest is Chris Luxon. Mr. Luxon is the former chief executive of Air New Zealand and also held a number of senior roles with the multinational consumer goods company Unilever. He lives in Auckland with his wife, Amanda, and 2 children. He is also the Botany candidate for the National Party. Welcome to the show, Mr. Luxon. Or do you prefer Chris?
Jay, how are you?
Oh, pretty good for a Sunday, thank you. Do you
Always
prefer
good
Chris
Sunday
or Mr. Luxon?
afternoons. Sorry?
Would you prefer Chris or Mr. Luxon?
Chris has been much better, my friend. Much better, thank you. Mr.
Yeah,
Luxon's my dad or my granddad.
So I think that's very much a Kiwi thing. It's pretty relaxed.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
let's start with how it transpired that you would want to transition from the high-flying world of business to politics. What brought that about?
Well, look, I mean, I feel very blessed. I grew up in New Zealand. I had a really good upbringing. I went to state schools. I was able to take opportunities, and I joined, as you know, this big global company, Unilever, which is Hindustan Lever in India. And
Yes.
I traveled all around the world, for 16 of my 18 years at Unilever, living and working and competing and just learning lots about the world of business.
Right.
Came back home to run Air New Zealand. And when you
Yes.
run Air New Zealand, you realise, very quickly that for Air New Zealand to be successful, New Zealand as a country needs to be successful. And so
Right.
you get involved in more of what we call the New Zealand Inc. agenda. Actually, how do we make this a better place economically, socially, and environmentally? And so for me, I think, when you lived overseas for 16 years and you see what a great country New Zealand actually is, but it's a big world out there. There's lots of 5 million people countries out there on planet Earth. And the question
Yes.
is, how do we continue to punch above our weight and continue to do well in the world? And so, I looked at it and I thought, well, we need to be much more strategic rather than tactical about what we're doing and how we're taking this country forward.
Yes.
And I think coming from my background, you come with some skills that are different, but and you've got to learn a whole bunch of new things, but they are transferable. How do you set a vision and have people want to follow you? How do you deal with multiple different stakeholders with lots of different views? How
Yes.
do you build teams and culture? But how do you most importantly, how do you solve problems? That's what I've been doing all my life, is getting into the root cause of a problem and then working your way through it to get an outcome and a solution. And so
That's very interesting. Would you say that's what's fundamentally different between politics and organizing people in politics and organizing people in business? Because they may not share the vision, and there's a lot of cloak and dagger stuff, and everybody's got their own turf to protect.
Yeah, well, I think that's the sort of mission and purpose of why you want to be a politician in the first place. And I come from quite a different starting point, which is that fundamentally business leaders, community leaders, political leaders actually have to work together on the problems or the challenges and the opportunities that we have. And they can actually all do different things. People out in the community that I've been meeting over the last 10 months really see the issue around family violence or around child poverty. Business leaders can do things and implement things with great speed and tremendous scale. governments can set up the rules and the train tracks by which we run the economy, society, and our environment on. So I think you've got to go at it with a view of I'm here for public service, not to, to be a politician per se. It's actually about an old-fashioned notion of I feel quite blessed. I've been very lucky and very successful, and I want to be able to give back in this way. And it's a small country, and for it to do well, we need people from all sorts of backgrounds coming into the political process, And I do think, not being a career politician is a good thing because you've been operating in the real world, you've seen things, you bring a global, local perspective, and you bring that experience into politics. Start from the third form or from year 9 again and start to learn a whole new game. As you said, it is a different game. You've not been playing rugby all your life, and now you start playing soccer. And there's lots for me to learn.
Far more different than that as well.
Yeah, but then some of the things are very common, right? It is, how do you, and you watch people like, say, John Key and Bill English and how they led a government for a very successful 9-year period, and they managed to unite people around what they were trying to achieve and get support for what they were doing, and then executed those things very well. And so I think, that's what we've got to get to in New Zealand is, I want to see really good execution. I want to see us dealing with our challenges, really well.
So do you find it's, you're probably not in that position where you have to form the consensus, but do you find it's easier in business to get people around the table, strike out a vision and then get them to get in behind it, as opposed to in politics where there's the variety of views is far more different?
Well, I think when you run a big company like Unilever or Air New Zealand, where you've got tens of thousands, or at Unilever hundreds of thousands of employees, it's not just hierarchy or command control that actually gets things done in corporations. I think that's quite an outdated concept. In many ways, the CEO, I never had a lot of hierarchy around me in any job that I had. Yes, I had a big organization to run and there was some structure to it. But I always wanted to be on the shop floor with the people in our factories or out at Air New Zealand on the ground or in the contact center or call center, wherever it might have been, because you learn lots by getting out with the people. And so what you learn in business in this generation of leadership is that it's about a team sport. I play my position in the team as the captain and first 5, and then you've got to pass the ball to amazing people across the place. When I first became CEO of Air New Zealand, I said, I want to be Brendan McCullum leading that World Cup run, where we've got a great Kane Williamson and a Trent Bolt and a Martin Guptill. It's a leader of a team of leaders. And I think how you bind those people together with all their diverse perspectives and experience, and you need that. You need people who think differently from you, have a different view from you. And it's just how you facilitate and coordinate that. And I think that process is the same in politics. The National Party has people who have come from all sorts of diverse backgrounds, and you want all those voices in the room, arguing it out, wrestling with an issue, and then settling on a course of action and then going out and getting it done.
So bringing this business nous to the table, also learning about the politics that's happening. Do you think this is the right time where you think the National Party can actually transform itself into an eco-economic political force which can deal with economic as well as environmental issues and still have find room to focus on the people, not just business?
Yeah. That's exactly what it's all about. It's all about the people, right? I used to say that at Air New Zealand. We don't fly people. We don't fly planes. We fly people because we're not there just to make it about GDP and statistics and economics in a very dry and abstract sense. The economics is important to get right. Don't get me wrong, because when we can get our economy growing and we can create higher paying jobs and salaries, and then we have the money that we need to invest back into education, into healthcare and all those sorts of things and into upgrading our environment. But the reason we're here is because we care about people, and that's why we've got to be able to do it. The means by which
they've got the bad press, for want of a better word, where they're seen as being focused more on the economics and not about the feel-good factor that the opposition seems to bring to it, where it's about caring and making sure that the people are not, getting rid of lunch breaks if you're the National Party, but bringing in, equal wage parity or trying to work towards a better minimum wage. So does National have a challenge there? Because it's kind of seen as the gung-ho business-minded folk, but where's the room in there for the people? I mean, you might be doing that, but where is that on the larger scale?
Yeah, so it is about the people, and that outcome is the same, is very much our outcome. That's what we're trying to achieve, is actually,
Hmm.
better, healthier, more successful people. That's really what we've got to do. The means by which we do that might be
Yes.
quite different from other political parties. So,
Hmm.
for example, AJ, I would put it to you, banging on about child poverty and family violence, and
Hmm.
actually those statistics have gone backwards over the last 3 years. It's not kind or caring just to talk about it and actually not to solve the problem, right? And so we actually have to be really intentional about getting back to root cause, and actually, as you would in tackling a business problem or any other problem,
Hmm.
actually building out the logic of that. I was looking at it, just yesterday. There's probably 1,500 5-year-olds that are in state care here in New Zealand,
Hmm.
and we already know that 75% of those 1,500 5-year-olds won't complete high school. We know that probably 25% of them are going to be in prison by the time they're 35. And so if we know that stuff already, that's just data analytics getting to those 1,500 kids and making a big, powerful intervention to
Hmm.
change the course of their lives early, so that we can actually avoid the family violence, the child poverty, the imprisonment rates, and all those things. So it's a question of different means to solve the same problem or get to the same outcome and solution.
Would you say you have to focus beyond the child, because a child in living in poverty is probably living in a family that's got poverty?
Correct. Yeah. So that's exactly right. You've got to get to those component parts of what's
Hmm.
causing that hardship, in that family or amongst for that child. And so, things like investing very deeply in that first 1,000 days. We've talked a lot about that in our election just already so far with our policy on the first 1,000 days.
Right.
We talk about the economy because it's, the reason is at the moment, we've got what 200,000 people unemployed. We've probably got another 250,000 that
Hmm.
are coming off wage subsidies that could become unemployed in the next year or so. That's a huge level of unemployment. And so, what you really want to do is, and I appreciate people who've been inoculated with a wage subsidy haven't really felt the full brunt of what the economic pain that's coming to this country in the next year or two. But
Yes.
the way to deal with that is to power up small businesses. In East Tamaki, we have, where I am in Botany, we have 2,000 businesses delivering $3.5 billion, but employing 30,000 people. On
Hmm.
average, that's just literally 15 employees that they have. And so if we can give them confidence to go off and invest and expand their business and to hire that one extra employee, and we can
Hmm.
do that multiple times across the country, that's what we're trying to do. So we're not against minimum wage increases or an extra public holiday or another five
Yes.
days of sick leave. It's just you should do those things for sure when the economy is growing at 3 to 4%. But our
Right.
economy just went backwards 12%. And what that means is you load those costs onto those small businesses sitting out there in East Tamaki and Albany and all across the country, who are
Yes.
who are who are, who are mum and dad investors or have got their own family business, and
Hmm.
they want to hire one or two extra mechanics from the mechanic shop or an extra printer in the printing shop or whatever it is they're doing.
Hmm.
But you can't load that cost onto them because all of a sudden prices go up, or all of a sudden they don't hire or they lay off staff as they deal with those higher costs. And
Or they
so,
go, or they go under. So I'm not going to
yeah, correct.
disagree
And
with
then
you
you
on
lose a
that.
lot
But
of jobs and you put more people on unemployment, right? So it's just a question of how you solve the problem and work your way through it differently, I think.
that's quite different from the 9 years prior to the last government coming in which National was holding the reins. It was not as people friendly. It was not necessarily looking into housing. It was not necessarily funding people properly in the health sector. It was not funding the health boards properly. Having said that, you're saying we've now struck COVID, and your policies and the Labour's policies really are converging. That's what I'm seeing. It's a convergence in terms of going, yeah, we need to care a bit more about people, otherwise they're not going to vote us in.
Yeah, well, I don't think about it through the political lens per se. I think it's
Right.
actually got to move beyond. These are challenges and opportunities New Zealand has to realise and deal with.
Yes.
That are
Yes.
30-year problems. And the problem with a 3-year political cycle is you get a lot of short-termism coming from MPs and from government, right?
Yes.
And it takes a year to get up to speed in government, a year of actually governing, and then the next year is an election year. And so you
Yes.
get this constant boom bust. And the more we can agree on what are the outcomes we need to achieve, and
Hmm.
then more importantly, what are the inputs to achieve those outcomes, and they sit there for the long run, whether it's on infrastructure, whether it's on how we tackle child poverty. Housing is a classic, right?
So that consensus among the parties, sorry to interrupt, really in an MMP situation, it's not just bipartisan, it's multi-partisan. You would like to see, like a CEO, you'd like to see that Parliament in New Zealand can come up with a game plan that everybody agrees to rather than having competing ideologies.
Well, I mean, we're going to have competing ideologies. The good thing about this country is that most of our political parties have a common interpretation of our past. There's some micro parties that will have a different take on that, but by and large, the mainstream political players do. But we do have different views on how to take the country forward. And so what I'm saying is when I look at things like infrastructure in this country, right? You look at it, we have 4 big challenges there. We don't have a master plan of infrastructure from the top of this country to the bottom of this country. We don't know how to fund it, whether privately, publicly, joint, how we do that. We don't seem to have regulation and legislation that supports development and growth, but also keeps our environment in good shape. And fourthly, you've got to ask the question, we're good at putting cones out, but we don't seem to get things done fast or well. So the question is, on infrastructure, what you don't need is a well-intentioned MP or minister who knows very little about infrastructure making decisions like that. You want to put that into an infrastructure commission, as I think all of us are agreeing is a good way to go. And then we get a 30-year plan, and it doesn't really matter which government's coming in and out. There'll be some differences on the margins, but the guts of what we're doing should be done. We've got a great plan on infrastructure as national. We need to really invest in infrastructure in this country big time. And we want to invest now because we want to see the country that we want to have and all live in 2040 actually exist. And that means, for example, we want to spend $31 billion upgrading the Upper North Island so it's the most attractive region in Australasia. And that means joining Whangarei and Auckland and Hamilton and Tauranga together. Big projects, but you've got to manage, and they're going to take longer than 3 years to get done, but they're the right things to do by the country for the long run.
And are you happy to have housing be part of that mix and also maybe not so keen on the foreign buyer ban?
Well, look, housing's been a real challenge, in New Zealand, and having lived overseas for so long, there's some markets I've lived in that you look at it and you get great value for money, and others that are very expensive, like London and Sydney, and even Toronto when I was there as well. But our biggest problem is we live in a country the same size as Great Britain and the same land size as Japan, with infinitely less people, and we still have a housing problem. So you just look at it from an outsider's perspective and say, that dog doesn't hunt. It doesn't sort of make a lot of sense. But the biggest problem when you get that through root cause is actually a very technical thing called the RMA Act, the Resource Management Act. A piece of legislation that was passed in 1991. It's 800 pages long. It's had 18 different amendments. And over time, it's just become a jumble. And so, we can't, out where I live in Botany, we can't do an eastern busway from Panmure to Botany through Pakuranga, 7-kilometre busway. The idea was started and talked about in 2005, and it won't be finished to 2025. It's 20 years.
So what's the answer? Scrap it all together, start fresh, or
correct.
Pick at it?
And that's normal, right? I mean, you can't have something sitting out there for 20 years that's no longer fit for purpose, and we keep band-aiding and number 8 wiring it, and it's still not working. And so the answer is we want to repeal it completely. We want to make sure we have an Environmental Standards Act that actually makes sure we have some really good quality environmental standards and criteria. But then we need an Urban Development and Planning Act that actually enables us to get going. We spent 3 of the 4 years just building the leg from Panmure to Pakuranga on this eastern busway in consultation and consenting. It's ridiculous. If you're doing any developments, as you well know, in your home or any renovations or extensions, it's a very torturous process. And
the light rail project also faced the same kind of difficulties. I think that's doesn't matter which side of the political divide you're on. If that thing isn't working, it's going to be the obstacle course you have to get over every time. So I don't think it works. And
sometimes it's the courage to go blow it up and to rebuild it and make it fit for purpose. And it's a temptation always to incrementally sort of just keep tweaking at the edges. But this thing's got to such a point, and we've got such a housing challenge on our hands, that you have to go to that root cause of that problem and deal with that, and that's what we're trying to do.
So, very interesting on both the infrastructure and maybe making housing part of it. In terms of your experience at Air New Zealand, this is a company that's gone through hell and back in the last 6-7 months, and it's still now out the other end. You knew it intimately, having been at the helm. What do you see happening to Air New Zealand and airlines in general in the post-COVID world? in a year or two? Are they still around, or are they going to just not survive?
Yeah, look, I think Air New Zealand, was one of the top. There's 200 commercial airlines in the world. They're very difficult airlines, businesses to run, as you well know. I mean, many of you will know the story of Air India and the different airline groups just in India alone, let alone around the rest of the world. And it's because they've got, you've got a lot of competition and your prices keep falling. It's cheaper to fly to London today from Auckland than it was 30 years ago. At the same time, pre-COVID, yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. But your costs keep going up, and then you've got to go spend a lot of money on capital with the profits that you've got if you've been making profits. So to give you a feel for it, in a very good year, in some of our best years globally in aviation, the average airline would make maybe $7 to $8 profit per passenger if they're lucky, is the global sort of average. Most of the time, airlines lose money around the world in an aggregate. So it's a challenging industry at the best of times. There's no doubt about it. International travel is off the agenda for some period of time, whether we want to hear that or not, but that's the reality of it. The world is not joined up. We don't have consistent healthcare responses. We don't have consistent economic stimulus. We don't have consistent border protocols. We're not even working collaboratively on developing vaccines, to be honest. So that doesn't create the conditions for international travel. And it's been democratized in such a degree, right? If you think about it, 4 billion of the world's 8 billion people traveled on airplanes, a couple of years ago. So, we're going to miss it a lot because it's actually driven a lot of connection of people to people, but also trade and flows of information and all those sorts of things.
Yes.
So it'll be much more irregular. It'll be much more, when we do travel internationally, it'll be, like post 9/11, there'll be a whole bunch of new protocols that'll eventually emerge. For Air New Zealand, they're in great shape. I mean, they were one of the top 10 investment grade rated airlines when I think everything else was junk status. So they're in the best position to get through this of anyone. I know the team well there, the new CEO, they're good people, they're talented management. They'll be able to work that through. And it's,
how long could they do it just on relying on the domestic passengers? How long could they do that? Could they get through the next 2 years?
Absolutely, yeah. The benefit of Air New Zealand in my time is we diversified the income of that company so that we could have a strong domestic business. We can have a strong Tasman business. We fixed that up, and we obviously fixed up tremendously our international business, which was very poorly performing when I started, losing $2 million a week. And so it's got a lot more diversification to it. But it's well supported in New Zealand. It knows New Zealand, and New Zealand is better than anyone. So we build a very strong domestic business as the anchor, and then ultimately add in the region. I think the world's going to be a bit more regional for a while, and so that Australian bubble eventually, once we're confident of safe borders and safe protocols, you could see Singapore and bits of Southeast Asia opening up to us, and that's sort of where it will sit, I imagine, for a while. But it'll come back, it'll come back. We will travel again eventually, but it will be different for sure.
So taking it from a smaller scale of the economy, which is the airline, to the larger economy, I know you're not really an economist, but I would love to have your take on, how things are going at the moment. The cost of living is going up, wages are kind of static. And what do you see at the end of the COVID tunnel? Where do you see New Zealand being able to get through economically, because that's supposed to be the strong point National has always campaigned on?
Yeah, look, I think there's no doubt about it. The long run trend for New Zealand over the next 30 years is very positive. We have what the world wants and everything we do, and we've got everything we need and nothing we don't. And there's rapidly rising middle classes, which if you just think through post-COVID, there's a 30-year trend that's the macro trend. And New Zealand, of all the countries in the world, I think is positioned very well in the geographic location of where we sit, where it's really, the subcontinent and Asia where the growth is sitting. So the power has shifted economically, culturally, from the Atlantic into the Pacific Rim region, which is where we're at.
Yes.
So that's good long run trend, but we've got to get from where we sit today to that place. And that's the real challenge of this election. And it's also the real challenge of the next 3 to 5 years, is that the next few steps are very critical for us to get there.
But Joe Blow, who's sitting at the bottom of the food chain in terms of wages and what have you, for them, the cost of living that keeps going up. It's okay if you're in middle and upper middle echelons, but at the bottom end, the cost of living, some people are having trouble actually meeting their bills or paying their rent. Many people, in fact.
Absolutely. And I hear that all around my conversations as well, as I move around the country and around Botany.
Yes.
That's why we've proposed just in the short term, actually tax stimulus, because if we can give you back your money and you can spend it as you see fit, that's a good thing. So when an average income earner on $64,000 can get back $3,000 worth of tax, that's a really good thing, and that's happening across the country. We want that money being spent in that way. So I think
they'll probably spend
right.
it regardless because they'll need to. It
Yeah,
won't be
absolutely.
because they're spending it on luxury or on something beyond necessities.
Yeah. So our real big thing we've got to work out in this country is how do we create more value from the stuff that we're actually selling? How do we grow our economy, and actually how do we create more value? If I just take, my old life, tourism, we grew tourism by $10 billion to the local economy here in New Zealand over my time. And it became our number one industry, overtaking, dairy. But the reality was, even when you looked at all of that, we were still middle table. The amount of people we had working in the industry versus how much money we got off our tourists, on a per capita basis, it was about middle of the countries in the world. So if we can add more value to the tourism experience, add more value to the agriculture, the horticultural experiences, the engineering and manufacturing that we're doing, that's ultimately how we create higher incomes. When I go to places like Denmark or Switzerland, which have 40% more wealth or 80% more wealth than the average New Zealander, it's because they have got an economy that is actually creating more value, and as a result able to drive and support higher wages and salaries. And that's why just having a shrinking economy and reallocating the pizza slices between each other in a shrinking pizza, that doesn't get you to where you need to get to. You've actually got to work out, how do I grow a bigger pizza so we can have more slices for everyone? And so that's some practical things. You've got to free up small businesses so that you make it easier for them to do business, so they want to invest and expand their companies to hire more people. You have to go off and invest in infrastructure, because infrastructure creates economic benefits, but also social and environmental benefits when you start dealing with infrastructure the way. The tax
valid points.
Yeah,
Very
so
valid points.
It's hard, AJ, because there's no single silver bullet that does this. It's actually a series of consistent small actions that add up to have a big difference. So that actually is then. Just if that, I'm thinking of one business I visited last week, right? Has 27 employees, a mechanical engineering business. He trains some apprentices. He's got, guys that have been there for a long time. How do we get him to take on 2 more employees,
Especially if he doesn't have turnover and, he's not actually making enough money.
Yeah, and the problem is you're not going to do that through make work schemes dreamed up by ministers of the government, pest control, weed control, all that stuff. You're actually going to have private enterprise and a small business in New Zealand. There's not that many big companies. It's small businesses powering us out of this thing.
Pretty much the backbone of the economy. I think that's kind of a global refrain anyway. SMEs kind of carry the brunt of it, as well as kind of make it all.
We don't make it easy for them, right? At the moment, this government's loading endless cost on top of them, and the outcome of that is more unemployment at the end game.
So obviously, it needs a firm hand in terms of the people running the country, even if it's not going to be the politicians who make the decisions, as you said. It's the long-term plan, the bureaucrats, the ones actually making sure that it's all implementable. But the leadership counts. So what are your thoughts about leadership? Now, let's look into the crystal ball here. If Judith Collins can become PM, and if she can't, in a year's time, where do you see yourself?
Oh, well, the
are you likely going to be the next leader of the National Party? That's the hard question to ask.
Well, the first thing I want to say is we've got a great leader of the National Party right now, and I know Judith well. I mean, I've known her for years. She's an outstanding leader, and I tell you why. One is she's our most experienced member, politician on the national side. She's probably our 3rd most experienced MP. She's been in 12 different portfolios as a very successful minister. She understands the arc of this country and actually how it's joined up and how it's connected really well. Yes. Secondarily, she's tough and she's formidable. She's got some thick skin, and so she can take it. But importantly, we're in a turnaround job, and in a turnaround job, whether it's a business or a community group or a government, you need to be really clear on yes and no. What you can't have is mush and non-decisions. You've got to say, yep, we're going to go down that pathway. you might even, in a business sense, you only get 70, 80% of those decisions right, but a decision matters much more in a world where you're in a world of crisis and pain. So and you're not going to die wondering with Judah. She's black or white, yes or no. So that's a really good thing for us to have. With respect to me, my job is frankly just to do my job, which is to win Botany for the National Party. And then I take it one step at a time. And I have to go to Parliament understanding I have a lot to learn. I've got some great colleagues to learn from there. I've got to learn the electorate, the party, the Parliament. And so for me, it's just one step at a time. It's how I've always done my career. I want to make a big contribution, don't get me wrong, but I want to be able to...
But you definitely see yourself winning the Botany seat because it's a blue seat. And,
well, I don't take it for granted.
As we discussed a little bit earlier before the thing, it's no longer, Jamie Lee Ross is no longer a thorn in the side, as it were.
He exited the race a couple of weeks ago, or a week ago, but look, I mean, the bottom line is that, I've been there now for 10 months. I've been out there. It's been my job as an unemployed candidate for the last 10 months or so, and I've really loved getting out there. But you never take it for granted in politics. You just got to keep going right up until election day, and keep reaching into new groups, new people, new voters that we haven't met yet. So it's just getting out there. So yesterday was human hoardings and leaflet deliveries and all sorts of other things, and it carries on today and until election
I think
day.
John Key was very active in Helensville when he first made his appearance on the political scene, and that's something you would probably want to emulate, right?
It's been really important. My job is to get my my head down, my tail up, and focus on the local issues in Botany. It's why I wanted to go to Botany, to be honest, was because I had lived there and grown up there and gone to primary and intermediate and secondary schools there. And so I loved the place. I had a big emotional connection to it. But secondarily, it is the most diverse place in the country in terms of over 60% of people born overseas. And so it's where the new New Zealand sits, which I have huge, appreciation for diversity and the strength that comes. And the third reason was actually, it was, to be selected as a National Party member there, you have to get selected by 60 local delegates of that National Party in Botany, residents of Botany. And so they have to want you. And so you don't get parachuted in or jumped in or anything like that. You actually have to go win it. And and I love that because those people keep you really accountable, with lots of rich feedback about what's working, what's not working.
Well, that's enlightened us quite a bit, and also shows that you have a game plan in mind, especially given that background in Unilever and in Air New Zealand, and you would like to see it implemented in the country as well on the political stage. Before we go, I know you've worked in the airline industry. Favorite airline food on the menu? Most people don't seem to like it, but I'm sure you have to. That's
how could you not like Air New Zealand's food? It was airline of the year for, what were we, 7 years in a row or something?
Yes.
I mean, I love the hamburger on Air New Zealand.
Right.
But you can get up front if you're lucky traveling on business premier.
Right. But not for the rest of the plebs. You're not going to be able to get it, right? So maybe something from the
You can't go wrong. You can't go wrong with the fish. Yeah.
You can't go wrong with the fish or the chicken. And on cuisine, what's your favorite cuisine? Maybe your best lockdown dish that you made.
I really like meatballs. Really, meatballs and spaghetti. Yeah.
Simple.
Sorry.
Simple stuff.
Simple stuff. Yeah, I'm actually a pretty simple guy at heart. So I like to keep everything pretty simple.
You're going to watch this with the wife afterwards, and she's going to say, "No, that's the only dish you know, Chris."
That's probably true. Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah. I'll tell you a great TV show I watched the other day, a series on Netflix called Cricket Fever. Have you watched that? That's amazing. That's a great story of teamwork and organisation and leadership.
I might have to look out for it. Haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, go watch that one. It's great. Really good.
That's good. And I'll probably also recommend the Greatest Indians in terms of creative. I think it's called The Greatest Creative Indians. That's worth watching as well.
I'll look that up. All right.
All right. And the last one I wanted to know, we all had this really crazy experience with the lockdown. You were probably cooped up with the family as well. What's your most happy story from that time?
I mean, for me, the lockdowns are always quite busy, to be honest, because you end up getting a lot of businesses that you're trying to help get through the border, or you had call banking out to seniors and all sorts of things going on. But for me, it was pretty special because I had both my kids come home. I've got a 21 and an 18-year-old. And so for us, actually, my 21-year-old teaching me how to play chess was actually really cool. He bought me a chess set with all the instructions of what the pieces do for my birthday. And so we just play on that. And for my
Did you
daughter
tell him,
and I,
son, I know how to make all the moves. I'm in politics work.
well, he's a strategic genius, and so he's very good at that stuff.
Good.
But I haven't been able to beat him or anything. But and then my daughter, it's just been great having her around, and you know, her and I both love music and lots of different types of music. So we just often just get out on our iPods and listen to music together. And, at home, which is fun.
Excellent. Great to hear the personal side as well as the working side of your life. Thank you very much, Chris, for joining us. Have a great Sunday, what's left of it.
Thank you, AJ. Appreciate being with you. Thanks so much.
Have a great day. Bye for now. So, folks, whether there is a future PM or a leader of the National Party in Mr. Luxon, well, he can't really comment on it because it's not the right time to. And also, he won't really know until things, well, evolve. So we'll keep an eye on that story and lots of others. And to get our weekly dose of analysis and a little bit of that, you know, masala that Mr. Sandeep Singh can only bring to us, let's welcome the editor of the Indian Weekender, Sandeep ji. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Ajay. Very good afternoon to you. Today we have got one additional hour added to our day. So,
yes.
And I can see that probably you have used it quite well already speaking to Chris Luxon.
Yes.
And from what I heard, it was an interesting conversation. So well done on that front, Ajay.
Well, I think it's the guest that makes most of the difference, really. So in that case, I think Chris is very articulate. He's got some very clear ideas about where he wants to go. And it's always good having somebody with that kind of mindset.
No, you did a great job. You're very relaxed. You obviously
You're still there.
How long have you been doing it for?
How long have I been doing it for?
Yeah.
Probably a few years. I think the last election was when it kind of hit a zenith where we had a really big run in. I used to be at another media house, and it was wall-to-wall politicians for the better part of 2017. So, yeah,
but you found your balance.
It's very interesting.
You pushed us hard, and but also it was pretty fair and balanced. But it was good. It was really good. I really appreciate it. So, hey, now Sandeep. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Sandeep, did you need me now, or do you want to talk to me later on, or did you say that at the beginning?
Sure, we will get in touch with you again, Chris. We have other conversation. We will continue with the show, and AJ would like to get my opinion on the conversation you had with AJ, and probably we will just do some 2 cents on that. And for now, we can let you go, and we'll get in touch with you again.
Awesome, guys. Go have a good afternoon, won't you?
Yeah, we're going to talk about you behind your back now, Chris. So
That's right. I'm leaving now, so feel free. It's all okay. It's all good. See ya.
See ya. Have a nice day.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Oh, he's a jovial character, indeed.
Well,
right.
sure.
Welcome back, Sandeep ji.
Yes, so let's start with your conversation. And as I was saying that, it was probably one of the interesting conversation you had. And I would like to give kudos to Chris on that. It was my first opportunity to speak to him and hear to him. And probably we will need to give him due credit that he was successful in presenting National's message, a key message to the electorate and to the voters out there in one of the most amenable ways in the recent times. So from what we have been seeing in National Party leadership, they have gone through some tumultuous time, and now they are, in a way, kind of getting back that momentum after that first election debate, where we have heard and that most of the commentators they have opined that probably the current leader Judith Collins had a good run over Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. So in that sense, probably they had some momentum back. But again, on the same day, we have also seen that the Colmer Branton polls where probably National was still languishing at around 30%, which is not a good news with only 3 to 4 weeks left for the election night. But so coming back to what I see that probably what Chris Luxon was able to do was to deliver the national key messages in a very amenable and, shall I say, a non-intimidating way. The way he
Yes.
was talking about the need to focus on economy, the need to focus on problem solving for some of the most compelling social issues that our country has been facing, be it child poverty, be it
Yes.
housing, be it helping the people on minimum wages. Probably Chris has done a good job today in this interview in expressing those views and the rationality behind what they are proposing to do. So, yeah, it was nice to hear on that front.
I found it very interesting in one respect. I think it's coming through more and more, and I actually want to bring up that and the possibility of what the electoral seat juggle is going to be going forward. But what I wanted to bring up was I think COVID has done something very interesting. It has brought both parties closer to the center, I think, or towards each other. There seems to be a kind of a difficult scenario of being able to tell what is the difference in their policy, because they all want to appeal to the people. They all want to appeal to the people in terms of going, yeah, we're going to look after you in this post-COVID world. So I find it very interesting. There's kind of a mesh happening.
Oh, well, okay. Well, that's your observation, and it's an interesting observation. I might not agree fully with that, but
Sure,
again,
sure. Yeah.
this is all about like opinions that can differ.
Yes.
Probably the reason why it appears that both parties they are coming towards center is because most of the indecisive voters they are sitting in the center, and both the parties, the Labour and the National, they have got their core supporters who have got that, who are ideologically bind with the party. But it is about the people who are at the center, who are basically indecisive and who take their votes from election to election from one party to another party. And from
And that
what
could
we
be
have
as high
seen,
as 16 to 20% in some cases, right? Because
sure, and from
not
what we have
everybody
seen
votes.
that, yes, before March this year, when National was sitting at high of 46%, as their former leader, Simon Bridges, had just reminded us a couple of days ago on a probably on a News Hub interview, where he said that National was polling at 46%. And since then, after the COVID struck, probably the party has been seeing a downward spiral where they have gone to as low as 25% polls, if one of the
Yes.
pollster, News Hub and One Read, is to be believed.
Yes.
So what we are seeing is that it's safe to assume that 25 to 30% would be their hardened core supporters who are going to stick with the party come what may. And probably around 16 to 18% voters who would have fled, they are the people who are at the center by and large, and they are not binded by any ideology or who are not core supporter of any one given party, and they are more than
Sure.
happy to evaluate the current political scenario, reward the current politician, and who might be uh, feeling very optimistic about what alternative dreams are being sold or alternative plan is being given to New Zealanders. So they take their decision based on that fact. And that is why probably both the parties, Labour and National, they are always looking towards appealing to those voters who are at the
Yes.
center. And that's why probably we can see same use of terminology in how they are selling their policies, be it on housing, be it on small businesses, be it on employment, or be it on managing borders and the impact of COVID.
So, do you think, just to segue from that, and that's a really good observation, do you think we have a scenario where MMP will still kind of pull this, it's like wagging the dog. It'll still pull us towards the kind of decision making that has to be done like it did in the last election?
Oh, well, that is a good thing to have. Like, I think probably we all can agree, and especially us here in ethnic migrant communities, that MMP
we need a voice.
is definitely, yes, MMP is a very, very good way of bringing minority votes to the center and be counted. And that's the whole purpose of MMP. So that's quite well. We, as ethnic migrant communities, with around 5 to 7% of votes, we cannot complain. It's a good thing to have. And it is the complexity or the nature of MMP system that generally one party, one political party has not been able to govern on its own. And that is why probably bringing in coalition into pictures, and that is where the last minute politics happen on election night and after. So it's a good thing to have. And yeah, fingers crossed. We will be watching that scene quite closely and observing on that.
So crystal ball gazing, I know the numbers and the polls don't always match up to the final output. Is it likely that we're not going to see one party, at least from those two major ones in the smaller party scale, which is the Greens and New Zealand First, one of them not making the 5% threshold? Do you think it's likely? And is it then going to be possible that whoever gets that 5% and which side they're aligned with, whether National or Labour, they'll have to kind of horse trade again?
Well, yeah, that interesting element will always going to be remains to be seen.
Yeah.
But the thing is that it's too early to rule out
Anybody.
Winston Peters, New Zealand First, and Green Party as well. Because if we are seen doing that, then probably we'll be seen towing one political party's line, who are basically hoping that New Zealand First or Greens can vanish away from this election. So let's not get into that. Let's the politicians do that.
No, I'm looking at the polls. The polls are putting those two parties at very, very tight thresholds. And,
no, surely. Well, if polls are to be believed, definitely Winston Peter is like a faded New Zealand First is not going to return with the parliament. But again, we have to give due respect to that.
You can't count Winston out. You can't count Winston out anytime.
You can't count
he can pull one out of the hat.
Yeah, sure. So there are still probably 3 odd weeks, and let's see where we land on 17th of October. We will continue to analyze and observe, and we will go from there.
It'll be very interesting indeed. It seems it's a done deal, but I think it also seems that it may not be a done deal. There's so much happening in the next 4 weeks in this COVID election. Thank you very much for joining us, Sandeep, and we look forward to being able to chew the cud again next week.
Great. Thank you very much, Ajay. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, indeed. So, moving on with our show, let me check with my producer how much time we have, because I think that might have run over. So we just want to wrap up as soon as we can and maybe move forward at a faster pace. The 2 or 3 stories that were making sense to us earlier on, one was that James Shaw, the co-leader of the Greens Party, had basically come out with a very interesting tactic. He has urged that if you want to keep Ardern at the helm, the Greens should vote. The people supporting the Greens should party vote for the Greens, and that would be a way to ensure that Jacinda Ardern continues as Prime Minister to basically carry on with that. Let's call it the coalition of the Green and Labour-led government. Where Winston stands in that will be, it still remains to be seen. And really, from a political perspective, either of those two small parties, though polling lowly, may have a lot of support still lying underneath it all, which means that they could still be calling the shots. They could still be kingmakers, so to speak, on election night. So, we look out for what more happens. Basically, James Shaw sort of thought of the whole thing, and he said, look, you need us because what's been happening up to now, especially with the COVID-19 recovery in sight, he says it's a short-term crisis. It presents an opportunity for them to fix other challenges such as climate change and inequality. And he's also gone on to say that they have a responsibility to do that because if we don't, then our children and our grandchildren will be paying twice. Once to pay off the debt associated with getting us through the pandemic crisis, and again, then to deal with those other challenges that the political parties have inherited and not actually had time to deal with them sufficiently. Very interesting. So this could make for a very interesting election follow-up between the next 2 to 3 weeks till we head into the polls. Now, in terms of the bad weather, there's supposed to be bad weather around the country. There's supposed to be snow in the south. There's a lot of rain all over the country, and it was supposed to be the same in Auckland, and it hasn't quite eventuated. But you can't sort of say it won't come later, maybe. It could be over the next day or so, it might show up. So if you're going to be out there driving, especially on the Harbour Bridge, just keep an eye out if you're on a motorcycle or in any kind of a high vehicle like a truck or a trailer that you're towing. You need to be really careful. And there's a possibility they might close the bridge down if the winds take up to those gale levels. So just be careful out there. Now, I think we'll just focus very shortly on the one little bit of news that had come out of the UK about Anil Ambani. गहने बेचकर चुका रहे हैं वकीलों की फीस और जी रहा हूं एक साधारण जीवन, Anil Ambani ने कहा. Now this came up because he was being presented to the courts in the UK, and the UK was saying, you owe $717 million to these 3 Chinese banks. You need to bring that and pay them up. And earlier they'd given them a deadline in June, and I guess that's something that they will keep pushing for. But he's saying, look, I have no money. I've got like 9.5 crores sitting with me at the moment, and I am in no position to be able to pay those kind of bills. I'm a simple man. I don't have a fleet of cars. When he was questioned about it, I don't have that kind of money that I had prior to us going into this really bad financial difficulty, and therefore I'm not in a position to pay that 717 million, which, by the way, अगर आप उसको convert करेंगे तो 5,200 करोड़ से भी ऊपर रुपए में बनता है. The court also asked him to pay 50,000 pounds of court fees. So, you know, I think this is a very interesting thing that'll keep playing out. And basically, the thing that came through that was interesting and funny in one way to observe, probably not good to be in Anil Ambani's shoes, was that the UK judge had ruled that he did not accept Ambani's defense that his net worth was nearly zero, or that his family would not step in to assist him when push came to shove. So this story will keep developing, and the Ambanis have known to have survived far more than this. One of the other stories we want to focus on in our coming weeks is going to be the rollout of the 5G network. Today, we will move on towards the end of the show because I think we've kind of run out of time, as my producer was just pointing out. जाते जाते आपसे एक फॉरवर्ड व्हाट्सएप की बात भी कर लें और थोड़ा सा एक नज़र डाल लेते हैं आपके आईपीएल रिजल्ट्स में. सो दिल्ली कैपिटल्स ने चेन्नई सुपर किंग्स को 44 रन से हराया. मैन ऑफ द मैच वाज पृथ्वी शॉ. उसके अलावा किंग्स 11 पंजाब ने रॉयल चैलेंजर्स बैंगलोर को 97 रन से हराया. मैन ऑफ द मैच वाज केएल राहुल. मुंबई इंडियंस के कोलकाता नाइट राइडर्स को 49 रन से हराया. उनके मैन ऑफ द मैच रहे रोहित शर्मा. And Rajasthan Royals ने चेन्नई सुपर किंग्स को 16 रन से हराया था. Their man of the match was Sanju Samson. Last but not least, Royal Challengers Bangalore. They defeated the Sunrisers Hyderabad with just 10 runs. Man of the match, Yuzvendra Chahal. So, getting back to the WhatsApp, I should actually look it up on my phone because we're kind of at that point where all the other stories that we want to bring to you have to be done next week. So this was funny when I first read it. May not apply to anybody at this point. There's a boss who's asking his employee who's turned up to work with a swollen eye, and he's saying, "Why is your eye swollen?" He says, "Sir, it was my wife's birthday yesterday, sir, and so you forgot?" And the employee says, "No, sir, I bought her a cake." I said, "Then how come your eye is swollen?" He says, "Her name is Tapasya, sir. But when that idiot in the cake shop wrote Samasya, it became a Samasya." Quality control is so important. आप सब अपना ख्याल रखें. जहां भी हैं, safe रहें, स्वस्थ रहें. I'm your host, Ajay Vasish, with The Weekender and Sunday. I will see you next Sunday in what is still, अभी भी, the safest country दुनिया भर में. Kia ora, salam, namaste, sat shri akal. Till next time. Do follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. I'll see you again, same time, next week. And until then, we'll leave you with this bit of touching poetry or a nazm.
एक मुद्दत से आरज़ू थी फुर्सत की, एक मुद्दत से आरज़ू थी फुर्सत की, मिली तो इस शर्त पे कि किसी से ना मिलो, मिली तो इस शर्त पे कि किसी से ना मिलो. शहरों का यूं वीरान होना कुछ यूं गजब कर गई, शहरों का यूं वीरान होना कुछ यूं गजब कर गई, बरसों से पड़े गुमसुम घरों को आबाद कर गई, बरसों से पड़े गुमसुम घरों को आबाद कर गई. ये कैसा समय आया कि दूरियां ही दवा बन गई, ये कैसा समय आया कि दूरियां ही दवा बन गई. जिंदगी में पहली बार ऐसा वक्त आया, इंसान ने जिंदा रहने के लिए कमाना छोड़ दिया। जिंदगी में पहली बार ऐसा वक्त आया, इंसान ने जिंदा रहने के लिए कमाना छोड़ दिया। घर गुलजार सूने शहर, घर गुलजार सूने शहर, बस्ती बस्ती में कैद हर हस्ती हो गई। आज फिर जिंदगी महंगी और दौलत सस्ती हो गई। आज फिर जिंदगी महंगी और दौलत सस्ती हो गई। दोस्तों, अक्सर कहा जाता है ना कि हमारी जिंदगी में सबक तब तक रिपीट होते जाते हैं जब तक हम अपने तौर तरीके बदल नहीं लेते। किसी भी बुरी आदत का वही नतीजा बार बार मिलता जाता है जब तक हम अपने आप को चेंज नहीं करते। सबक बनकर वो नतीजे सामने आते हैं। मेरा मानना है आज सृष्टि भी, कुदरत भी इंसानियत को कॉलर से पकड़कर झंझोड़ कर कुछ कहने की कोशिश कर रही है। देखिए ना, हवा पानी साफ हो गए हैं, गंगा जी साफ हो गई है, हर जगह पंछी चहचहा रहे हैं। हम घरों में बैठे हुए हैं तो प्रकृति खिल रही है। मान लीजिए जैसे प्रकृति इंसानियत को बोल रही है कि तुम रुक जाओ, तुम थम जाओ थोड़े वक्त के लिए, मुझे पुनर्जन्म लेना है। आओ हम मिलकर ये समझने की कोशिश करें कि कुदरत हमें क्या सिखाने की कोशिश कर रही है। क्योंकि जब ये लॉकडाउन खत्म हो, हम अपने तौर तरीके बदलें। कोरोना हारेगा, हम जीतेंगे। जय हिंद। टेक केयर ऑफ योरसेल्व्स, स्टे होम, स्टे सेफ।